Hello, I'm Brett Gilliland, host of the Circuit of Success podcast, and here's what's coming up on the show.
I knew you were relatively raw in this world, but our advisors were so attracted to your message and your energy that I wanted to get you out there, but I had to see if you were willing to make some of these changes, and I did. And that really was a defining moment, because then I came up and did their series of events, and the energy took off, and then next thing you know, I'm speaking all around the world with some of the largest groups in the world. So, but that was a real defining moment at the time. It wasn't fun to listen to that, but sometimes we need some of that tough love, and I'm always grateful for that.
I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got the privilege of interviewing again for the second time, Chris Johnson. What's up, Chris? How you doing?
Hey, Brett, how are you? Happy to be back. I can't believe it's been since, I think you said April 2018.
April of 2018 is when we chatted last. It's crazy. I said time flies when we're having fun, and
where did it all go?
Doing that.
It's craziness.
You were also probably the only person I know that on my podcast, at least, I've had your son Matt, I've had your daughter Kristen on the show, so we've had all three of you on, and it's been awesome. I just love that. Matt and I have stayed connected, and I still got to get Matt out on the golf course, because I've seen he's a pretty good golfer, so we're gonna have to see who wins some cash from each other. Who you putting your money on? Is he still playing?
Yeah, I play, but I'm like an 8 handicap, and he's good. He's really good. Okay. So yeah, it's amazing. He doesn't play that much anymore, but man, he's still good. So yeah.
Well, kids have a way of doing that, don't they?
Yeah. So I don't really, I used to try to play him, straight up, and I always would lose, but it's just my ego getting in the way. And then now I still take strokes, and I still lose. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, those stroke things are fun, but they're frustrating too, aren't they?
Yeah.
So you are the founder and CEO of On Target Living, author of numerous books. You've got a new book out called Rest, Eat, Move. You have the power to feel your best. So we'll talk about that. I read this book right here in 2018, Capacity. You and your son Chris wrote that. You and your son Matt wrote that, and it's just an amazing book. I love it. So we'll dive into your stuff as well. But if you could, for those that didn't hear us back in 2018, Chris, just maybe give us a little lay of the land on who you are, what's made you the man you are today.
Well, Brett, without getting into the weeds too much, I turned 66 this year. I've been doing this a long time, over 35 years. But I was a business economics major at Western Michigan, so I'm here at our headquarters here in East Lansing, Michigan. And when I got out of school, there wasn't really a lot of jobs, but I had kind of thought about, what do I really want to do? And I was always interested in exercise and working out and eating right. I got into bodybuilding in the early 80s. And then I decided to go back to grad school. And so I went back to grad school at Michigan State in exercise physiology. And when I got out of grad school, I worked in a hospital doing stress testing, and I worked for a private practice doctor for a couple of years. But really, the thing all started to change when I went to work at the Michigan Athletic Club as a director of fitness and personal training. And I did that for about 17 years, and that's when I started speaking. And I wrote a couple books, and then I decided to take my deal on the road in 2007, and I've been full-time speaking and since then. And then, as you mentioned, my daughter and my son Matt runs our business, and we have a nice team here, and we have a beautiful headquarters in East Lansing. And so what we try to do is help organizations be their best and feel their best. So that's where we're at today. And we also have a very vibrant e-commerce business. We sell wheatgrass and cod liver oil and things like that. So content, delivery, training, and then our e-commerce. So that's our business.
And would you say that the bulk of what you guys are doing, like you said, really is around those three things, right? Rest, eat, move, and in what order, right? Because I think all three of them are equally as important. Maybe I assume you would agree with that, but we'll dive into that. But let's talk about, if we can, for a while. There's a lot of business owners and people in sales that listen to this podcast. What was it like, the grind for you? So, you made it sound easy, which you guys have done you got amazing business. But what were you doing during the early days when you didn't have a well-oiled machine running a business? What was it like? What were the day-to-day like for you? You were raising a family, young kids, and traveling and doing all those things. What was it like?
Well, like many of your listeners, viewers, that Yeah, it's a grind. When I got out of grad school, in fact, when I entered grad school, my wife came back to me and said, "Hey, honey, we're pregnant." And I go, "Oh, okay." And then a couple of months later, we found out we're having twins. So I'm working full time driving a Frito-Lay truck delivering Doritos, and she's working full time in a law firm, and we're raising you know, two twins, and then I'm in grad school full time. So was it a grind? Absolutely. And so you look back and you're like, how in the heck did we do it? And then I think that work ethic, again, I'm old school, but when I worked in the Michigan Athletic Club, I was working 60 hours a week every week, and we had one of the largest personal training programs in the world. And slowly over time, it was that bedrock of training that I realized, okay, how do I take this and scale it? And so when I started speaking full time, my wife, I can remember coming back to her, and I remember Merrill Lynch reached out to me and wanted me to do this training for their advisors, and they came back and said, "We want you to do X, Y, Z." And I'm like, "Well, I have a full time job. I can't do that." And then I thought to myself, I'm like, "Hey, times to go." So anyway, I started on Target Living in 2006, and I went full time speaking in 2007. It was just me and Dawn Miller, and she scheduled my events, and then Matt came on 12 years ago. And but yeah, it's like any business. People say, "Well, I want to do what you do," and I go, "Well, do you really want to speak for free for 5 years?" They're
Right.
like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, it just doesn't happen." So I think sometimes people, nobody's a black belt, to start with. Everybody's a white belt.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, you do the Jim Collins thing. You got to have the kind of like your Circle of Success podcast. You have to have passion, and you got to feel like you can make a living at it. And last but not least, you need to feel like you can be really good at it. So I think that's the circle we always talk about. But as you mentioned, it doesn't happen overnight. And I probably wouldn't do it any other way because, again, the struggles we all face, whether it's our health or whatever, but some of the best stuff is through the struggles.
Yeah, for sure. And so, do you have a defining moment? I was in a meeting earlier today, and we are talking about we're going to have an event coming up in March on International Women's Day on March 8th. And I was talking to three of the ladies in our firm, and I said, let's talk about a defining moment. Like, I had a defining moment in my life in 2003. So I started in the business in 2001. 2002, I was like the advisor of the year in our area here in St. Louis for the company I was at. And then 2003, I should have been fired. I mean, I didn't do any production. It just, I let this talent think that's just going to carry you. And it was a defining moment for me, right? To where I learned you have to work hard. You can't just show up and expect things to happen. You got to work your ass off to become successful. And even though it was the toughest year of my life, in looking back now, 22 years later, it was the best year of my life. Right. So do you have a moment like that for you on the way up, on the journey that you said, man, that looking back, that was a defining moment?
Yeah, I think there is many defining moments, but one that I can really think about. I had an opportunity to get on the biggest stages in the world with Merrill Lynch way back in 2007. It was just before the market kind of imploded. But I was doing this event for Merrill Lynch managers, about 3,500 people in the audience, and I didn't get a rehearsal. And so before I was going to get up on stage, one thing got pushed back, one thing got pushed back. And the next thing you know, when I get up there, this is not ready to roll in front of
Mm.
3,500 people. And so the woman that hired me, I didn't know she was in the audience. And I talked to her about a couple of days later. And she said, "Hey, how'd the event go?" And I go, "Well, it's really tough to start with." And she says, she asked me a question: "Are you a professional speaker?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, you need to act like one." And I said,
Oh,
"What do you mean?" She said, "I was in your audience and you weren't ready to go. You didn't even know where your clicker was. You didn't this." And I'm now making excuses that, the reason I didn't know that is because they didn't give me a rehearsal. And she said, "Well, any professional speaker would have never stepped up on stage in front of 3,500 people without a rehearsal." And she said, "I have you scheduled for some of these largest events that we do. I don't think you're ready to go." And I thought to myself, I go, "I am ready to go." And you're right. I did drop the ball. I need to do this. She goes, "You're tired. Your slides are tired. Your jokes aren't funny." I go, so I really got hit between the teeth. But she was exactly right. She said, later I saw potential in you. I knew you were relatively raw in this world, but our advisors were so attracted to your message and your energy that I wanted to get you out there, but I had to see if you were willing to make some of these changes, and I did. And that really was a defining moment, because then I came up and did their series of events, and the energy took off, and then next thing you know, I'm speaking all around the world with some of the largest groups in the world. So, but that was a real defining moment at the time. It wasn't fun to listen to that, but sometimes we need some of that tough love, and
Yeah.
I'm always grateful for that.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? The tough love and how in the moment it sucks, right? You probably were pissed at her. It's like, you don't understand. I got this. I'm good. This is your guys' fault. But then when you slow down and learn from it, that's when it becomes really, really valuable information, right?
Well, and then now when I go to an event, I'm always, I'm overly friendly. I want to be. I'm not that, I don't want to be that person. But at the same time, I treat it like, you know what, if I don't have a rehearsal, and I'm not going on. And so I've really learned along the way, because a lot of times you get with different people, whether it's the AV teams or whatever, and they'll say, we're all set. I'm like, no, we're not set. We're going to make sure this thing rolls. And even doing that, sometimes it doesn't always go off. But you have to set the tone. You have to let them know that I'm coming in here. My goal is to have an amazing impact, if as much as I can, but it's gotta be in the right realm. So, and
Yeah.
then we do the same thing. I deal with podcasts and virtual events and the same things. Is preparation is everything. What's the process look like? And sometimes that's what I teach. Other people in this space. I'm like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, you got to. What's your process? What's it like before you're going to get up on stage? What do you do? The day before. How are you preparing? So again, that's the stuff that I think people, once they get the process in place and they really start to polish it, whether it's an advisor or whatever profession you're in, then you can really, really get good at what you do.
Yeah. And I just love the fact, I want to make sure we're spending more time on that you talk about the preparation, you talk about the rehearsal. I mean, you're the 325th person I've interviewed and just had our 6th anniversary, but it's, we have the same process every time, right? There's your picture, there's your bio, there's your stuff. Here's my notebooks over the last couple of years. They're the same notebook. And I don't say
Right.
this as in bragging. But you got to have a process, right? So when I'm getting ready for my interview with you today, what does that look like, right? So if it's a sales meeting somebody's walking into, yeah, maybe you've given the same sales presentation a million times, but that million first time matters just as much as the first time. And so what are you doing to make that process better? So for me, my question for you there is, what do you do now to stay a student of the game to keep getting better and growing from what you do every single day?
Well, I think I always try to do, and number one, I want to be prepared. So I just did a webinar with a group out of Chicago just before I came on. And so preparation is starting we did it at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So at 10 o'clock, we're getting ready. Lights, camera, action. I already know who I'm talking to, what we've done with them. I know the players. It's all that preparation.
Yeah.
And then I go through my slides, and this is what we're going to discuss. And I kind of rehearse in my mind what I'm going to do. And then I try to bring as much energy to the party as I can. And so it's the same thing over and over. And then you step back and say, okay, what resonated with them? What kind of Q&A did we do? What were they asking? What were they not asking? So then you make some notes to yourself and like, hey, this really resonated with them. These are the questions we're getting. And so it's not an accident now that you're hitting those points during your presentation in the future. So to me, even though it might be similar, but it's always new. And so if you're not making it new and fresh, like if you did, how many webinars or how many podcasts have you done? You said 325. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if it's 325 and you're bored, then your listeners and your viewers are going to feel like you're bored. So
Right.
I'm not bored. I'm excited. I want to see the twinkle in their eye, even sometimes I can't see it, with virtual, but that's my goal. My goal is to say, how can I share this content, which I think is really important, but maybe help them understand how important it is, and that how they can take it and put it into their world. So that's always the challenge, and that's the exciting part of it. But yeah, a lot of it preparation, always looking at how can I make it better. And I'm a big fan of being curious, asking questions and being really curious, and what can we do better. And as you know this, you're good at this, and this is what you do. But when you think you know it all, you pretty much don't know a whole lot. So,
Right.
so
Yeah,
I've been
exactly.
doing this a long time, and I always feel like I can learn something.
So I'm gonna turn the page a little bit, and I say this as not just because you're a guest on the show. I truly mean this, or I wouldn't say it. Is you? I think you look younger today than you did in 2018. So one of the things I wrote down, I wrote down is how do we age gracefully? Right? You got a lot of 40-year-olds probably listening to this podcast, and I don't know exactly how old you are, but you look younger than you did 5 years ago. So that's a good thing. So let's talk about
Yeah,
that.
well,
How do we age
I
gracefully?
turn, yeah. So I'm turning 66. I have 5 grandkids. As you know, Matt and Kristen are going to be 37. So, yeah, Tab's in the room with me. Tab's going to be 75 in the fall, and we've been friends for a long, long time, and we try to take care of business because you got to walk the walk. But if you think about aging, my book was set up. If you looked at my book here, I just pull it up here so people can see it. But the reason rest is first, eat and move, is because rest is really the pillar. And so if you don't have that pillar of rest, I just did a MITCon conference, MIT conference in Boston in the fall. And I was telling all the group, these are all CFOs, some of the top CFOs in the world. And I said, you got to be intentional about your rest. And if you look in the financial services arena, I find more and more advisors don't get enough rest. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I get their blood work back and we look at their blood work and their testosterone level for both men and women, it's low. I already know that they're not getting enough sleep. So so then they were like, how'd you know that? I'm like, well, because if your stress hormones are on, your building, your sex hormones are turned off, off. So the point of it is we have to understand the power of resting. And again, if you're not sleeping, that's the fastest way to age the human body. So we're a big fan of understanding stress and understanding, the conversations you have with yourself because stress is a killer. And then you have to have strategies to be and perform at your best from a rest standpoint. And that's how you breathe. Are you breathing through your nose, using your diaphragm, are you slowing it down? Because we're just the opposite. We breathe through the mouth, we breathe through the chest, and we breathe too fast. So one of the fastest way to calm the mind, relax the body is change how you breathe. And then we move into sleeping and how important it is. And with all the social influencers and we deal with every day, but people think they can hack their sleep. And I tell them, here's the deal. There's nothing more important than getting a good night of sleep. You have to understand the value of sleep. And if you think you want to hack it, I'm here to tell you, you can't. There's
Right.
no hacking sleep. And then last but not least, do you like the pace of your life? I find a lot of people, especially in the financial services arena, love what they do. They do not like the pace of their life. So then we have to deal with that. And then from there, we move into, are they getting enough water? What nutrients are they missing? Are they eating more whole foods? And then, are they fasting 12 to 14 hours? And then we move in our body, we're getting sunlight. Um, so those are really as simple as it sounds. It's no different than you were talking about your process. That's what I do with people when they come in and do retreats. We do one-on-one training or we do live events is we help them build a sustainable foundation that allows them to age and be vibrant, in that capacity as we age. And I think people are looking for that. And we just got back from skiing out in Colorado, and I'm skiing with two of my friends, and we're both, they're a little bit younger than me, but all in that same 65 range. And I was teasing them. I'm like, hey, I've never seen you guys ski this good. And they're like, you know what? I've never seen you ski this good. And we are all kind of patting each other on the back, but really was. It was three 65-year-olds who've been skiing their whole life that are doing pretty good. So I think that's what people are looking for from an aging standpoint. They want to have that vibrancy as they age. And again, it's the body is incredible in its ability to heal and self correct if you just give it the right ingredients.
Yeah. So what were you doing? I always compare this to like investing money. You can't invest $1 today and expect it to be, worth $3 tomorrow, right? Well, I mean, I guess you could get lucky and do that. The point is it's compounding, it's time, right? And same thing with our exercise. At 65 years old, skiing, doing all that. How many people listening to this right now want to be 65 and skiing? Raise your hand. I think a lot of people will be raising their hand. But what were you doing when you were 35 years old or 40 years old, right? What have you been doing for the last 30, 40, 50 years of your life to be where you're at now, to be skiing at age 65?
Well, I think the big thing, way back in the day, I was an exercise physiologist, so I was always interested in playing, and I played sports and working out and all that kind of stuff. So I've always been a big fan of strength training because strength training is the fountain of youth. I would say today, we did a podcast that comes out on Monday on strength training, but I think the way I stretch a lot more, I work on my mobility, flexibility. I train a lot smarter than I used to. I would say my nutrition is so much better than it used to be. I'm a big fan of wheatgrass and cod liver oil and just eating real quality whole foods. And then I'm really intentional about my rest. So I think I've polished the stone quite a bit as I've gotten older, but I always was interested in my health. I think that's the biggest thing, that you have to get people to be intentional about their health. And if they're not intentional about it, no different than their wealth, they're not going to have it. And so it really is what you just said, is compound interest. You just build and build and build, and then you keep getting better at it. And I think that's what your group would tell you as advisors or whoever's listening to this. It's all about how do you do what you're doing, and make it 1% better or whatever,
Yep.
wherever you're at, and what's driving you. So I think that's, for me, I've always been interested in it, but I've learned a lot over time. I know a lot about medications. I know a lot about blood work that I didn't know early in my career.
Yeah.
But those are things that I definitely, for myself personally, I try to really pay attention to those three pillars that are how we rest, eat, and move.
So that let's talk about that. You said strength training. You're a big fan of that. So, I do strength training. I do yoga. I do stretching. I do a rower or a bike or a treadmill. All those different things. I got another exercise I do a lot for mobility type stuff. How much time should we be spending on weights versus mobility, flexibility type stuff, and versus cardio? Those three areas.
Well, I think number one is you got to get people interested in understanding that they need to move their body every day. So that mindset needs to change. I need to move every day. Now, it could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, but I'm going to move my body sometime during the day, because the greatest benefit of moving your body is what it does for your mind. And so we got to get out of the mindset that workouts is just for my body, heart rate variability, and all the stuff that's going on out there, but what it does for my mind. So I'm going to move my body every day. And then from there, I would spend a lot less time doing cardio and a lot more time working on mobility, flexibility, balance, and strength. And I think that's the missing link out there for many people. Getting on a treadmill or getting on elliptical or getting on these things, there's nothing wrong with letting your brain kind of just chill out. But that's where I see the mistake. People are getting they're spending too much time doing cardio and not enough balance in the routine. And so when I bring them in and we do training and they're doing XYZ, I'll challenge them. What's your balance like? What's your mobility, flexibility like? What's your strength like? And so now we start looking at what are their goals, and then really start training specifically for goals, and then make it enjoyable. I think that's the big thing when you talk about movement. It has to be somewhat enjoyable, or you're not going to repeat it. So I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of play. As we age, we need to play. I just mentioned about skiing, but then you want to train to play. And so
Yeah.
I have a lot of people pickleball, and I play a lot of paddleball, but that's their workout. That's what they do. They
Right.
play to get in shape. I'm like, no, you gotta you gotta train to play. So anyway, so that's really my thoughts on creating that balance in your workout, or your movement routine.
And so what's that look like for you, or for, people, again, whether they're 35, 45, or 65, what are you doing? Like, what is that? Are you just literally old school stretching? Is it there a program for that? Like, what
Yeah,
are you doing there?
so in my book, and again, we have it on our workout Wednesdays on our website on Target Living, but I would always start some type of movement. So I'll get in there and I'll do dynamic warm up. I'm moving my arms overhead, I'm twisting, but I'm warming the body up. And then I do a handful of yoga poses that works on my mobility, flexibility, balance, and strength. That might take me a total amount of time, maybe 5 to 6, 8 minutes. But I'm a big fan of working on your extremities. Like, for example, I do mobility, flexibility, wrist exercises, hands, my feet, my ankles. So I'm always doing that kind of stuff. And then I do generally some type of cardio. Like today, I did mini trampoline. So I get on
Hmm.
the mini trampoline for a minute. I'm hopping, running, jumping, doing over, and then I get off that and I do a 3 day strength split routine. So today I did chest and back and core. I do the mini trampoline. And at the end of the workout, after I'm warmed up, I'm going to do some restorative stretching. So I work on the hip flexors, I work on my back. I work on all these different things. And that would be something I didn't do probably 20 years ago. So that allows me to keep my mobility, flexibility, and not hurt myself and feel good. So that's kind of a typical routine for me. I
Yeah.
warm up to get my heart rate somehow up there. I'm going to do the strength training, and then I'm going to finish up with some type of restorative movement, and then I work on my breathing at the end. And I find
And
many clients coming in that they're like your clients. I mean, they're going 900 miles an hour. They're super
right.
successful in their businesses, but they'll say to me sometimes, "This is the best hour of my week." And I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Because you intentionally get me to slow down at the end."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that breathing, is it more of a meditation type breathing, or is it like belly breathing, box breathing? What kind of breathing are you doing?
It's traditional belly breathing. So again, you're going to breathe through the nose. Use your diaphragm, your belly, and then I'm a big fan of the 4-second inhalation and the 6-second exhalation. And so
Yep.
if you can get people to do that, and we do that for a minute or so, the next thing you know, they're breathing 5 or 6 breaths per minute versus you know. So it's a skill that people have to
Yeah.
learn, because as they learn it, they're going to just be naturally slow breathers using the diaphragm. And
Yeah.
then understanding the power of box breathing is more an energy thing. That's why the Navy SEALs do it, because they're getting ready to go into battle. So I'm not a big fan of holding the breath when I'm really trying to get them to chill out. But there's lots of different ways. In fact, in chapter in my book, I have the lost art of breathing. It's a whole chapter on breathing. But
Yeah.
if you make a simple nose, belly, slowing it down, that's really powerful stuff for people.
It is, and I have found too. I've been focused on breathing and meditation for probably 7-8 years now, and it's been a life changer for me. From a guy that's got a ton of anxiety, it's been probably the number one thing I would say actually that's helped me get through anxiety, and now it be an ally versus an enemy. But I would say it's also a big deal that when you're sitting in that meeting and you're in a boardroom versus working out, and you kind of have some anxiousness come in, or man, this is a really big meeting, and you have to have a tough conversation. I have found that training, right, you do in the gym also has helped sitting at a desk, right? That it's like, okay, I
Well,
can quote
yeah.
unquote meditate and you not even know it, right? But I'm slowing my heart rate down.
Well, again, what you're just saying, now you've developed a skill. This is a skill. People are like, oh, I already know that. Well, you don't practice it, so it hasn't turned into a skill.
Yeah.
So when I look at breathing, you want to teach people the skill of how to breathe. In fact, I had a couple in last night. I have birthday balloons, and this is something all your advisors could do with their clients. But get a bunch of birthday balloons and have them blow it up, and they know the strength of the diaphragm right then. And so
Hmm.
now you get their attention. So if you don't have that strength in the diaphragm, you will become more of a chest breather, especially as you age. And the fastest way to quiet the nervous system, which is your sympathetic nervous system, that's fight or flight, is changing how you breathe. So now we have a skill that I can calm the mind, relax the body, and I can do it on demand. And nobody even knows you're doing it.
Right.
Sometimes when I do alternate nostril breathing, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah.
My wife will say, you're an idiot. I'm like, okay, because she knows we're probably not having a great conversation.
Yeah. It's
And
like
as
you
soon
just
as I
gotta tell
do
me.
that, she starts to laugh, and then things become a little bit more relaxed. But
Right.
the breathing is a powerful skill.
Yes, it is. It is. What have you seen? I'm sure you have, because you've been doing this a long time. I've been seeing these people on social media that tape their mouth at night to sleep. What are they
Well, the
doing
big
there?
thing we were running out during COVID, toilet paper and mouth tape. And so when James Nestor came out with, the book Breathe, which is about 400 pages about how to breathe, he starts his book off talking about, having the awareness with the mouth tape. And so when people, tape your nose closed and they breathe only through the mouth, that turns into a disaster. And then we do the mouth tape. Now they realize they breathe a lot more through the mouth than they knew. So it's more of an awareness thing. I don't think you need to go to a level where you have to tape your
Right.
mouth. Being more aware of it during your day, and people around you, how many people breathe through their mouth and not through their nose. So during my day, most of the time, I try to breathe through the nose 24/7, even when I'm in the gym, unless the intensity gets too high. So
Yeah.
that's just an awareness but yeah, I don't think people need to go to the
Yeah.
extremes of mouth
Yeah.
tape.
I'm with you. And you exhale through your mouth when you're breathing?
I always exhale through my nose, inhale through my nose, exhale through my nose.
Okay. Okay.
So it's more, because the nasal passages are the switchboard for the nervous system. And there's nothing wrong, like in yoga, they're always getting you to exhale through the mouth. There's nothing wrong with that. But I like to teach my clients inhale, exhale through the nose.
Okay. It's good to know. So let's talk about the eating. So we talked about rest. It's the fastest way to age the human body if we're not doing it. We got to be purposeful with it. We got to be intentional. We've talked about moving right there. Let's talk about eat. I went a little bit out of order, but rest, eat,
It's okay.
move. What are we talking about eating now? What kind of habits do we need to be creating? We all know that, right? Eat healthy, eat your vegetables, shop around the exterior edges of the grocery store and all that stuff. But let's dive deeper into that.
Well, I think the biggest thing you have to understand about eating is if the nervous system is out of balance, you can't have good digestion. And so the first thing you have to get under control is stress and understand the power of sleeping and the breathing and all this stuff. Once you can understand that a little bit, it's now think about what nutrients are you missing? Is it B vitamins? It's omega-3 fats, whatever it is. And number two, what are you not absorbing? So I always try to teach all my clients that your gut is a garden. And if you look at your gut as a garden, then everything begins in the gut. So hormones, melatonin, serotonin, all these wonderful neurotransmitters, sleep hormones, testosterone, growth hormone, it's all made in the gut. Well, if the gut's not healthy, you're not going to be healthy. So step one is you got to get the gut healthy, treat it like a garden. That's the soil, that's the seeds, that's the water, that's the sunlight. So once that's under control, then we start looking at, where do we begin? And it really begins with pre, pro, and symbiotic foods, not supplements, but foods. And most of those live in the carbohydrate family. So it's apples, bananas, real oatmeal, sauerkraut, pickles. We have a whole handout on, pre, pro, and symbiotics, cacao nibs, coconut. So once I start bringing some of those real foods into the body, then we get into the water, making sure they're hydrated, because water, as simple as it sounds for everybody, if they don't put it in front of them, they get behind, it's too late.
Yeah.
So you really need to get, the minimum water. I'm a big fan of ginger and, lemons and things like that. But then we move into the superfoods. And so this is a big part of our business. I don't want to be a commercial here, but cod liver oil, we promote sell cod liver oil because omega-3 fats is about 95% of your population deficient. And the number one benefit of omega-3 fats, including cod liver oil, is brain health. And so when you talk about aging, if you're not getting an omega-3 fat, you will not age well. So it's good for your skin, your digestion, your heart. It's great for hormones, anti-inflammatory, and it's high in vitamin D3 naturally. So the first thing I try to get all my clients to get some from omega-3s, flax, chia, the cod liver oil. And then from there, we move into chlorophyll because chlorophyll is great for the gut, anything dark green, but really want to start eating chlorophyll foods. So that's going to be kale, spinach, broccoli, bok choy. And then what we promote is spirulina chlorella, which is a freshwater algae, which is high in nucleic acids, a builder, immune system, and then frozen wheatgrass. So now we cover lots of ground with very little supplementation. And that gets us to the next piece, which is the source. And what the source means is, where does it come from? So if you're eating an apple, the apple's the source. Then we turn it into apple cider vinegar or apple cider vinegar gummies. We keep moving away. And that's what I see right now in the world today. Everybody's doing all these supplements. And reality is, why? Just because you put it in the body does not mean your body's going to break it down and absorb it. So that's nutritionally when you say, okay, let's get the gut healthy. Let's look at some of those foods that make the gut healthy. Make sure you're getting enough water. Then look at certain nutrients we're missing. Like my oatmeal on the run in the morning is loaded with B vitamins, loaded with magnesium, but it's all coming from food. So it's 100% rolled, thick oats, cacao nibs, shredded coconut, so maybe some frozen raspberry, a couple raisins, some nuts, plant milk, cinnamon in the refrigerator the night before, loaded. And again, when I'm doing training here at our facility with our clients, especially in the morning, I bring it so that they like, oh my God, this is so easy and it's so this and so that. And by the way, it tastes good and it's great for my gut health. So,
So
but
you just
that's really
put
what,
that
and then
into a
the last,
bowl. You put that into a bowl
yeah,
at night before you go to bed or whatever. Put it in there and it's ready to rock the next day. You have nothing to do other than just start eating it.
you just start eating it. Yeah. So again, simple. We bring groups in here. I had a group in here a couple weeks ago, 25 people. I made oatmeal the night before. Probably took me maybe took me a minute to make. Doesn't cost hardly anything. But the
Right.
real thick oats, put them in the glass container, put your stuff in it the night before. It's perfect oatmeal. Can't really screw it up. Any monkey can make it.
Hmm.
And that's the only, in our cookbook here, the only recipe I get credit for is the oatmeal on the run. So the kids are kind of making fun of me in that. So, and then from there, we look at, meal patterning and the timing. And so once I start upgrading using the food target, so if you're, you know, if your folks aren't familiar with this food target, we can send you this. Again, it's easy to
Yeah.
do. You can send it to your listeners, but it's just upgrading and then look at your timing. Am I fasting 12 to 14 hours overnight? And am I eating, 3, 4, 5 times a day? So, and that's the big thing out there right now is like everybody's skipping meals, shrinking their time. I'm like, no, if you want to be healthy and have good gut health and not stress the body, not be on a diet, then you need to make sure you're fasting overnight and then you're eating throughout the day. So,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
make this so hard sometimes.
It is. It's amazing, isn't it? But you just go back to the normal things the way our forefathers ate, hundreds of years ago. It's pretty simple.
Well, I think the thing we're seeing more today, whether it's the keto or whatever, so we're cutting macronutrients out of the diet, and that's not going to work.
Yep.
So, back in the 80s, we cut out fat. In the 90s, we had a high protein, low carb. Today, it's the high fat, no carb. So we need those macronutrients because they're essential. We need
Yeah.
healthy fats, you need healthy proteins, and you need healthy carbs. So that's where people are getting it wrong, in my opinion. And I'm seeing this because that's the world we deal with their blood work. I get their blood work back, and their hematology report's not good. Their GFR, their kidney function's not good. Testosterone is lower than they want it to be. They don't know what they're doing wrong. I'm like, well, yeah, you're doing protein shakes, you're doing energy drinks. It's not an accident to what I see.
Right.
And then they waking up because the blood work doesn't lie.
And
So
what's the
that's where you start
wheatgrass
getting.
do for us?
So the wheatgrass is high in chlorophyll, which is naturally detoxifying, but wheatgrass is the highest source of minerals of
Okay.
any nutrient in the world. So it's grown in the ground for 5 months. We get ours from a farm about 120 miles north of Toronto. So the wheatgrass comes to your house in a frozen ice cube, and you can just put it in a glass of water. And it's the first thing most people do in the morning. That's a big thing we try to promote because it covers so much ground. I don't have to take all these minerals because it is in the food back to the source. So
So
that's
then it
really
just
our
melts
whole
over time.
premise.
It just
Yeah,
melts in the water and just.
you just drink it. And it's clean tasting, and I had a couple in here last night, and they're like, "Is this going to taste bad?" I'm like, "You be the judge." I'm like, "Wow, it tastes pretty clean." I'm like, "Yeah, it's not supposed to taste bad." Same thing
Yeah.
with the cod liver oil. Cod liver oil shouldn't taste bad. It's an
And
organic lemon flavor. So
if I'm doing a omega-3 vitamin, do you like that versus because you guys do the liquid, right?
yeah, so back to the source. So again, if you looked at this bottle here, we get it from Dutch Harbor, Alaska. It's high in vitamin D3. It's line caught. Livers are frozen on the boat. But now the dosage, 1 tablespoon a day, would probably be equivalent to maybe 6, 8, 10 gel tablets. So now you're not
Wow.
doing the gel tablets. So again, we're getting away from it. So my dose isn't as good. The quality is not as good. But then people are afraid of the taste. I'm like, okay, you try it. And they're like, that's when I do live events, or Matt does it, or Kristen. We take these things and people are shocked at the taste. I'm like, well, it shouldn't taste bad. So that's what we're missing out there. It's no different than financial services arena. It's all about the quality. And if you
Yeah.
can get people to do higher quality and do the compound interest, then their need for all these little itty bitty supplements starts to disappear.
That's great. I really appreciate all this, and we'll keep diving. We'll put the link for those listening and watching to the Rest, Eat, Move. You have the Power to Feel Your Best book in the show notes here. Pick it up. I can tell you they're great authors because I have read their books, and it's phenomenal. So I'll be buying that one as soon as we get off here.
Yep.
I'm gonna buy some
Don't be
wheatgrass.
buying.
I've been fighting the wheatgrass.
Don't be buying it. We'll send it to you. I'll send
All
you the
right.
book.
I've been fighting the wheatgrass and cod liver oil, so I circled it and said buy it. That's what I put in my notes right here. So you'll be getting a sale, at least one sale today out of me.
Well, I think our cod liver oil. No, I'm not thinking. I know it. I think it's the best quality in the world.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time and energy really getting that. And the same thing goes with the wheatgrass. So again, you be the judge. But yeah, those are two really powerful superfoods that we recommend.
And then my last thing, kind of on the Rest, Eat, Move thing, that move, like, How many days a week are you working out so hard that you're breaking a sweat? Like, how important is that versus, your flex? Like, if I'm moving around and doing some of those yoga, like I can do 40 minutes of yoga and not really sweat. So do I need to be sweating every day?
No, no.
Okay.
What you need to be doing is you need to be doing movement. And like you said, sometimes movement's going to be more taxing and other times it's not. But if we redline all the time, that's no fun. So
No.
that won't last long. In fact, your stress hormones will go up. So when I'm overtraining, back to the bodybuilder, I've competed in 10 bodybuilding contests since 1985. When I was overtraining, my resting heart rate would always go up.
Hmm.
So I don't want your viewers, your listeners to overtrain. And so that's part of the recovery. But I want you to move. So like certain days I might just do stretching and I'm go for a walk and it's pretty chill pill, or maybe some yoga activities. I would
Yep.
say yoga is easy because sometimes yoga can be really
Oh,
challenging,
right.
but you don't always need to break a sweat or, get into anaerobic, training and that kind of thing. So,
Okay.
but I'm a huge fan of what movement does for my mind.
I like it. So I picked up a couple of your core values from your website. I'm a huge believer. Our firm's a huge believer in our core values, also trust and respect. So I picked two: anything is possible, and then curiosity and growth. Those are two of your guys' core values. So when you hear those, like, let's talk about that. Anything is possible. What does that mean to you?
Well, when it kind of gets in towards health, again, I think your listeners all would agree. If you don't have your health, you have very little. And
Yeah.
so, why is that not front and center for more organizations? That's why Matt and I wrote capacity, because again, we always get bunted. Hey, we'll get to that when we get a chance. Well, I go, wait a minute. That's your core. Your people are always your greatest asset, and the greatest asset of your people is their health. So it's not about being perfect, but understanding that if I have greater energy throughout my day, I have a bit more capacity, I feel good, I get a good night's sleep. I'm gonna rock the house. I'm
Yep.
gonna have so much, more to give. So that's the foundational pillar. So a big part of that is if you're not going in a great direction, well, maybe start asking better questions. How could I be a little healthier? How could I enjoy the process? So I think that's the challenge all the time is I challenge them from a curiosity standpoint. If you're on a cholesterol medication, you don't need to be on it if you're willing to change your lifestyle. If you're a
Yep.
diabetic, you don't need to be a type 2 diabetic. It's not only reversible, so that's where you start throwing that curiosity that, why don't I sleep anymore? Why do I have ED? Why do I have, problem with my testosterone? Why I have trouble sleeping? But when you get curious, those are the questions we're always pushing the buttons. Then you start uncovering the real answer. And the human
Mm.
body, as long as I've been, it's amazing ability to heal and self-correct. So it's no different if you start today and you don't have a whole lot of resources financially. We all know if you start doing a little bit at a time, it starts to add and add and add. And the next thing you know, people are doing pretty good.
Yep. Taking my notes here. Awesome. Curiosity and growth. I think we talked about that. So, your daily choices. I mean, when you look at your day, if I follow you around the camera every day, all day, what am I finding? Obviously, the rest, eat, move is important, but what are some more things, habits, rituals that you have that have helped you become, super successful over your lifetime?
Well, a thing I really focus on getting good sleep. So, and I look at my lifestyle. I try to really pay attention to my space in my life. So if I don't have a lot of space in my life, I'm not going to be able to write books. I'm not going to probably be very good on stage. I'm probably not going to be very good, with my kids and my spouse and my grandkids. So that's really important to me. And then from a business standpoint, I try to bring energy here every day. I mean, I'm very intentional about my energy. And so as kind of a leader in our organization, if I come in and I'm like, oh, yeah, I just don't feel like it today. I'm like, you kind of have to fake it sometimes. But
Uh,
if I'm not having good energy, then I step back and say, what am I doing that I'm not real happy about? And so, what's my process look like? Do I have enough space? Do I have enough downtime? Am I going from meeting to meeting? I used to work for a hospital many, many years ago, and it was crazy how many meetings we would have in one day. So I really look at my space and my day And do I have enough time to eat? Do I have enough time to move? Do I have enough time to breathe? All that stuff. That's kind of why I set the foundation. And then I start really being intentional about what I'm going to get done today. So I'm always looking at, like, today, what do I have to do today? I
Yeah.
have to leave the office. I got to get it done today. So I'm not trying to do 10 things, but what are the 3 most important rocks I got to move today?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I look at my business. But the foundation of my business is always based around my lifestyle.
Yeah. How much of that planning are you doing? Are you writing it down in a journal, on your phone, a little Post-it note? Like, what's that look like for you?
Well, my son will tell you I'm a paper guy, so I write it on paper. And
Yeah.
then what I have is I use Brian Moran. Brian
Yep.
Moran is
12-week
the author
year.
of the 12-week year, and I use that plan for everybody. And
Yep.
so at the beginning of the week, I look at my 12-week year and what are my rocks I'm moving this week, and then I break it down. When I come in the morning, if I'd have time later that day, or what I'm going to do in the morning, and I go, okay, this is what I got to do today. And then if I don't like what's going on, I got to really look at adjusting my calendar.
Yeah.
Like, if I got too many meetings, I can't get to this. I'm like, wow, why am I not blocking this time to do the stuff that's most important? So I use that model, and I think that's helped me a lot over the years of setting up my calendar and my schedule. And when my schedule is flowing, then I'm flowing,
Yeah.
and that allows me to come up with good videos and good content and things that we do in our business. But I think scheduling is a big deal for people because they have too little space in their life, and
Yep.
they don't like the pace of their life. So to me, I'm always looking at, do I like the pace of my life? And I don't. I try to pay attention to that. And if I don't do that, then everything else starts to fall apart, including lifestyle habits.
It's funny. I was just pulling up my phone here. So I go to my calendar every Wednesday, from 1 to 3, it's already pre-booked in my calendar, strategic think time. And I've been doing this for years. And it's funny how many people I've shared this with, but nobody really ever does it. But just having think time put on your calendar on repeat. I used to do an hour and a half of it. Now it's 2 hours where I just sit down with my black journal here, an ink pen, and no technology, and just think. And sometimes you literally just sit there and you kind of look out the window and but you think. And I have found it to be some of the most critically important time for me as a leader, as a father, as a husband, of anything I do all week long.
Well, and I think the big thing you're saying right there is you give yourself some stillness. And
Yep.
in that stillness is where all the good stuff comes out. If you looked at, how the mind works, you have the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. And so again, that 2-hour block gives you that space in your mind to think. And again, talk about sharpening the saw. I mean, how incredible is that? And then people will say, well, I don't have time to do that. You don't have time not to.
Right.
If you don't have time not to, then you need that time, because the time we love to waste is not wasted time. You might be looking out the window, but you're getting your mind right for something crazy good in your world.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I always have to remind myself, like, I was flying back from Houston a week ago, and I'm on the plane, and I'm like, all these things came in my brain because I wasn't watching TV. I wasn't, texting. I wasn't doing anything except just sitting there. And then I'm right with you. I'm a paper guy. I'm writing the stuff down.
Right.
I'm like, wow, okay, that's cool. I need to write, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you have to have that stillness to let these things up. So I
Yep.
love what you're saying. Have that on repeat
Yep.
and do it every week. And again, I think it needs to be not something you don't do once a month, but you do weekly.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do our listeners find more of Chris Johnson and On Target Living? Where should we be sending them in the show notes here?
Well, I think you could send, it's our website, which is ontargetliving.com. And if you want to give them my email, I'm happy to chat with them. As my son Matt used to say, Dad, you're too available. I'm like, that's the goal. So, and I think Matt's definitely changed his tune over time because we're here to help you. But
Yeah.
my email is my name, Chris Johnson with a C, all one word, at ontargetliving.com. So yeah, we have a
Awesome.
great team. We have a lot of resources. Podcast comes out every week. And we have to get you on our podcast.
Let's do it. I would love it, man. That'd be
Yes,
fun.
absolutely. We'll do that.
Well, great. This has been awesome. And always love spending time with the Johnson family, and keep up the great work with On Target Living. And just thanks again for being on the Circuit of Success.
My pleasure. See you, Brett.